Well, they stopped the music. I think that is my cue. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Nordenberg, and as the chair of the University of Pittsburgh's Institute of Politics, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Institute's 2023 Regional Progress Forum. Those of you who have become accustomed over the course of the last quarter century to attending the IOP's annual elected officials retreat may find that name change to be a bit disconcerting, but have no fear. This is an extension of the retreat-style gatherings that the IOP is so well known for. But because we had to do some reconfiguring of the format this year, we thought that the use of a somewhat different name would be appropriate and more consistent with truth in advertising principles. One thing that should seem familiar to all of you is the theme of this gathering: building a strong region that provides opportunities for all. I say that because in one way or another, that has been the theme of the last half dozen retreats and of many programs offered between the annual retreats, a focus on not only driving economic growth, but on ensuring to the extent possible that the opportunities presented by that growth are widely shared, both by individuals and by communities, urban, suburban, and rural, throughout this region. The Institute of Politics was created by then Pitt Chancellor Wesley Posvar in response to a request that was made by a group of civic advisors he had assembled at the time of the university's bicentennial in 1987. The IOP's ties to the Chancellor's office have been strong and constant since then. This retreat program in particular has been sponsored jointly by the Institute and by the Office of the Chancellor for the past now 26 years. My main mission today then is to introduce someone who might fairly be viewed both as our very special guest and as our very gracious host. Given both my unsurprising respect for the office of Chancellor and my affection for those who have held the position, it always has been a privilege and always will be a privilege to introduce the Chancellor of the University of Pittsburgh. Today, though, is something extra special because I have the chance to introduce Joan Gable, who not only is Pitt's 19th Chancellor, but is the first woman in the 236-year history of the university to serve in that role. Chancellor Gable has come to us with an amazing array of achievements and experiences. As you would expect, she has been a professor, she has been a dean, she has been a provost. Most recently, she was president of the University of Minnesota, one of this country's great research universities. While at the University of Minnesota, among many other accomplishments, she helped complete a $4 billion fundraising campaign. She developed transformational partnerships with organizations like the Mayo Clinic and Google, and she emerged as a respected national leader in higher education. Not only does she serve on the boards of a number of national educational organizations, but she also is the vice chair of the Council on Competitiveness. The counselor acts as a unifier across the competitive ecosystem, working to champion a nonpartisan agenda that fuels entrepreneurship and spurs the commercialization of new ideas. Its central aim in nurturing national competitiveness is to increase national productivity and to deliver inclusive prosperity for every American. Both that goal, which tracks the theme of this session, and the pursuit of it through a nonpartisan agenda are entirely consistent with the values and approaches that have long been associated with the Institute of Politics. Though she is not a native of my home state, the land of 10,000 lakes, my interactions with Chancellor Gabel, as well as the reports from others, suggest that in addition to her many other strengths and qualities, she is Minnesota nice. That will make her a particularly attractive and welcome participant, not only in campus activities, but in the broader community. To give just one example of the range of the almost unending demands on her time, this evening when we are all relaxing in the glow of the Mo Coleman dinner, she will be at Acrisure Stadium using every bit of her considerable power to try to put a struggling football team back on the right track. We wish you well with that and with everything else you're doing, and we thank you for being here. And so, as I said just a moment ago, it is my privilege to introduce Chancellor Joan Gabel.
Hello, everybody. It is absolute pleasure to be with all of you. I've met several of you already as we've been sort of, working the room, if you will. But I'm looking forward to getting to know more of you, and I'm really excited about this year's theme and the fact that you all would stop your day. In fact, I congratulate you with all of our busyness that you stop your day and come together to really think about what's happening in this region, what partnership can mean. Very grateful that Pitt gets to play a role in this, wants to play a role in this, and I'm particularly grateful for the role of Pitt's Institute of Politics and, of course, Mark's leadership in bringing all of us together. I'm also obviously personally very grateful to Mark. As you might imagine, he's quite the angel sitting on my shoulder as I figure all of this out. And the idea of coming into an institution that's 236 years old and has an incredible legacy, but also is facing a very interesting, complicated future, but a future that is filled with exciting possibilities as you try to navigate something like that and you think about the way in which we all work together. I'm obviously extremely grateful to Mark for his unique ability to balance the importance of legacy and being anchored in a sense of place with what the opportunities for the future are. And the future is bright. There's a reason why we have themes about building a strong region that provides opportunities for all, because we know that that's our potential. We know that that's what we want to be, and we know that when we all come together, that's who we can be. And of course, the cornerstone of that is partnership and the idea of that kind of collaboration with people like you, community leaders, stakeholders, our elected officials, government partners. And with that, I want to acknowledge and thank all of you for coming, but in particular, acknowledge our commissioners, Ashi and Chu, Representative Miller, Representative Frankel, Representative Cooper, Commissioner Abramovich too, and Senator Jay Costa, who are here. I think also when you think of all of this together, what this can mean for our optimism about what the future holds, how we can look to each other to think about what the needs and wants of our communities are and how to prioritize those and what it means to be partnered in a long-term commitment. The university obviously thinks long-term. That's what 236-year-old institutions do. But we hope to do so in a spirit of agility, in a spirit of new thought, in a spirit of turning a page into what next chapters can be. There's a lot going on in higher education right now. Most of it's good. Some of it's hard, right? I mean, and we're under pressure as a sector, if you will, and pressure is always a little hard, but on the other side of it is often where things evolve and improve. And I think we're very open to that here. What does it mean to be fulfilling the mission of teaching, research, and service? What does it mean to be equitable? How do we engage properly in order to ensure that we're doing those things? I will say Pitt is 100% viewed as a national leader in this space. Before I came here, while I was still in Minnesota, I was part of a group within our national organization. Our national organization is called APLU, the Association for Public and Land Grant Universities. And within APLU are commissions that focus on the different attributes of higher education where we think we can do good or can do more. And one of those commissions is the Commission on Economic and Community Engagement, and I chaired that commission and learned during that time about what Pitt is doing around community service. It is the gold standard. It is considered nationally the gold standard in community and economic engagement. And in fact, when Mark talks about duties as assigned, like me personally figuring out what's going on with football, which would be a terrible idea. But this year, Pitt was one of 4 U.S. universities that were selected for the APLU Kellogg Award for Community Engaged Scholarship. And this award for us was focused on what's called the Pittsburgh study. I don't know how many of you have heard about this. Some of you are probably directly involved in this, but this is an amazing partnership between the university and the community. And in fact, we have a short video on this. I'm not sure who's pushing the button, but someone is pushing the button. Please, if you'll indulge me.
The Pittsburgh study is a community-partnered collective impact initiative. As a university and economic engine in our region, we've also opened up numerous pathways for career development for our community partners.
What impresses me about the Pittsburgh study is that community members are equal partners with Pitt researchers on this work. And that was true from day one. So the very definition of what it means for a child to thrive was co-developed by community-based partners and university-based partners. Collaboration like that drives real change, because now the research team is not only looking at family and schools and physical health, they're quantifying neighborhood noise and pollution, access to public services. Do parents get the support they need?
Our relationship and connection to the Pittsburgh study just immediately brought a whole suite of service providers and ways to think about bringing resources to the community in a way that we wouldn't be able to otherwise.
The Pittsburgh study offers a place where scholars can learn the best practices in community-partnered work. Well over 240 organizations are involved. Dr. Jamil Bey from Urban Kind Institute is one of the extraordinary scholars involved in this work.
The externalities of investing in children and how that improves our economy, how that improves our quality of life across the board with the Pittsburgh study elevates Urban Kind by providing resources and networks that would have taken us years to do.
We expect to continue for decades as we grow meaningful, impactful research.
The Pittsburgh study is a tour de force of scientifically rigorous, community-engaged research. It's a perfect example of how a university engages with local communities to transform the future together.
What she said. Now, the Pittsburgh study is what universities can do when you think about research, engagement, people, and long games, long arcs, thinking about change for the better. So the Pittsburgh study was one of 4 Kellogg Award winners, and then on Tuesday at our national conference, just a couple of days ago, we won the award, which is the C. Peter McGraw Award. This is the national award for which university is doing the best community engaged research. So obviously we're really proud of that, but in addition to just sharing with you a point of pride, it really is something that gives us a lot of hope and also a lot of confidence in the kind of partner that we can be for all of the different initiatives that may emerge from a conversation like this, from the creative thought of a group like this. And we're game. We want to hear from you. We have faculty with great ideas. You have great ideas, and where the magic happens when all of that comes together. Just a couple of other things that are emerging as examples. We have a really wide range of programs and community partnered research at our community engagement centers in Homewood and in the Hill District, and thinking about the future in Hazelwood Green. We have leadership in dual enrollment programs so that high school students can start earning college credit while they are still in high school. And just thinking about the domino effect of that comes at no cost to the student. So not only are they completing faster at a lower cost, but they can enter the workforce sooner and start their journey with their full earning potential sooner. So it's a win on a series of levels. You'll be hearing more and more about BioForge in Hazelwood Green and all of the amazing biomanufacturing, workforce development, education, community engagement opportunities there. The biomanufacturing, for those of you who don't know, is a high-tech economic sector around biological sciences. So it is, the term has been coined, not by us, but we're obviously happy to embrace it, that this is the life sciences century, building on all the innovation in AI and robotics and bringing it back to things with a heartbeat and the science with a heartbeat. And we're really strong in that space and really looking forward to thinking about what the future holds there. So those are just a few projects. We could talk about more, or you could help us think about more. Either way, we're really looking to strengthen and increase our partnerships throughout the region and be part of the cornerstone to the theme of the work that you're doing today. It's really delightful to be in the company of like-minded people who are thinking about building a stronger region and how that creates opportunities for all. And we're very honored to be a part of hosting you. And I thank you very much for the chance to say hello. And of course, thanks again to Mark. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Chancellor Gable. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to host you today to our Regional Progress Forum, Building a Strong Region that Creates Opportunities for All. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Samantha Balbier. I'm the director of the Institute of Politics. I want to take a moment just to extend a few thank yous to the IOP team who have been really instrumental in putting this day together for us. So Brianna Mihawk, our Assistant Director of Policy Programs, Helen Sav, our IOP Policy Analyst, Patty Rice, our Administrative Manager, and Diane Martin, who assists us from Mark's office. So thank you all for doing all of that so we're here today. I also want to thank all of you for attending this discussion. To all the IOP Board of Fellow members out there and to our policy committee members, thank you for being here, and thanks always for your dedication to the region and involvement with the Institute. As Mark mentioned, the IOP has been hosting annual forums like this, typically known as our elected officials retreat. We did have to change that a bit this year, but we've been doing this for the past 26 years. The forums are designed to advance the IOP mission of improving the quality of life in our region, and we have a few objectives that we just want you to keep in mind as you go and listen throughout the day. First is these forums are meant to share information with you on new approaches to long-standing and also emerging problems within our region. They're here to help you understand where opportunities exist to build upon our regional strengths and to advance innovative public policy that will address the content of the day. We usually achieve these objectives with the second day of the retreat, which would have included convening our public policy committee members on the topics that will be discussed. I just want to let you all know that we plan on doing that, but in early 2024. So if you're interested in participating in those discussions, I want to make sure you touch base with Brianna to let her know, because Brianna will be setting those up for early 2024. So today's program is about the people of our region. It's about who we are, how we are faring, and the opportunities that exist, or the opportunities that need to exist to allow us all to thrive. We have amazing speakers here with us today who are going to talk to us about Pennsylvania's economy, where it's strong, where it falls short, and how it is experienced by the people in this region. We'll hear about how to strengthen our economy and our workforce through partnerships between the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. And most importantly, we will hear how essential it is to develop these economic and workforce development plans with an explicit focus on providing the necessary supports that are needed for individuals to advance and thrive. Each of our keynotes are going to be introduced by regional leaders who are also partners of the Institute of Politics. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first regional leader and partner, Stephanie Pashman. You all know Stephanie, but for the sake of those who might not, I'm going to just say a few words. She's someone who thinks about these issues daily, who we all know as an innovative and entrepreneurial regional leader. She's been the CEO of the Allegheny Conference on Community and Economic Development since 2017. Before joining the conference, Stephanie served as the CEO as Partner for Work and its predecessor, the Three Rivers Workforce Investment Board. Prior to that, she spent many years in healthcare policy, including 7 years at the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services as Director of Policy and Special Assistant to the Secretary. She's involved in numerous national and local organizations, including board service for the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Workforce Development Council, Vibrant Pittsburgh, and the Jewish Community Center. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you for this kind invitation to be with you today. There's such a great feeling being in a room with so many colleagues and friends and being part of an organization that is near and dear to my heart. I like this organization, the one that I have the privilege to lead, the Allegheny Conference, where we are equally invested in creating what I call a next generation economy for all, how we can make this region thrive and grow and be prosperous. And what strikes me even further in being in this room, and when I look at your mission of nonpartisan forum for policy change, in a moment where political discourse is strife and complicated, and it's so hard to have frank debate, it's wonderful to be in a space where you created this opportunity for us to come together around facts and data and opportunity and putting people first. So as you all know, the conference is 80 years strong, and it's our job to really think about marketing and positioning the region. And so while we're the economic developers, the flip side of that coin is really that concept of talent and workforce development. And so it's a real privilege to stand here today and be able to introduce someone who truly is, like when one of my kids, I said to them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they said, I want to be one of those people that they call the expert. Like when you turn on the news and it just says expert. And they were like, how do you get to do that? Well, we actually have someone today in this room who really is truly an expert. Maria Flynn, who is the CEO of Jobs for the Future in the workforce spaces, is really our rock star. What she does is understand what is going on in all the communities and all the trends, but she's always pushing to the next level of where we are going and where we can be going to provide thought leadership, direction, and structure for communities to be able to create prosperous and thriving workforces. When I'm struck by looking at, having been in this space 6 years ago every single day and not being as fresh on what's happening in the talent and workforce space, I was really struck in thinking about where Jobs for the Future is today and all the issues that we are ripe in Pittsburgh region that we are thinking about day in and day out are what Jobs for the Future already has a program around them, a thought around them, something we can learn from them. Whether it's equity and advancement, whether it's thinking about how innovation fuels together with traditional industries, whether it's about sustainability and climate impacts, they're working on all of that. And I think it's a real privilege and an honor to be standing here today and be able to introduce Maria to you and then to follow up with some questions and answers and have a conversation with her. So Maria, with that, I'd like to welcome you to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Hi, good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Stephanie, for that great introduction. I've been such a fan of Stephanie's work over the years. We've had the privilege of doing a lot of work with the Pittsburgh workforce boards over many decades, so it's wonderful to be here. I appreciate the invitation, and particularly because at Jobs for the Future, our mission is so tightly aligned with the theme of your event, and as we heard, the theme of what this event has focused on over the past several years. So at JFF, our mission is to drive equitable economic advancement for all. And we do that really by working across like a multitude of issues, as Stephanie mentioned. So everything from looking at issues like early college, high schools, and dual enrollment on the young adult side, to incumbent worker training and employer engagement, to really trying to keep pace with the technological advancements that are happening in our field, and also kind of tying in a really strong approach around state and federal policy as part of that as well. But in the past year, we really took the opportunity with our board of directors and our executive team to take a step back and really think about, at the end of the day, what goal are we truly trying to achieve? And for us, we determined that that is about getting workers into quality jobs. And so what I'm going to walk through this morning is some rationale for why we've made that decision, how I believe that that applies to the work that you're doing in this region, and then walk through kind of what we call 4 imperatives for strategies that you can undertake to really make this goal of quality jobs for all a reality. So that's what I'm going to do, and then Stephanie and I are going to sit and entertain some questions from all of you. So to dig in, just to start with kind of where we are as a labor market in this country. So winding up 2023, you would think that we would have the wind at our back, right? Because we continue to see these historically low unemployment rates. And when I started working for the U.S. Department of Labor back in 1991, right, if someone had said then, we were going to have a 3.9, national unemployment rate, we would have thought they were nuts, right? But yet, here we are. And when you look at the Western Pennsylvania rate, it's even a little lower than the national rate, so 3.8%. And so we also know that kind of these numbers don't tell the whole story, right? Which is why you all have the need to kind of, and the importance to come together and really step back and look strategically about what's happening in the region. So Pittsburgh has a lot to feel great about. As you know, compared to a lot of other Rust Belt cities, like you have experienced a resurgence that others haven't. Like my husband's family lives in Cleveland, right? And I think Cleveland's still kind of waiting for some of that resurgence to happen. Hopefully that will happen soon. But we also know that here in the Pittsburgh region, kind of the fruits of that resurgence haven't been equitably distributed, and they're being felt differently in different parts of the region. I'll give a couple of examples. So here in Pittsburgh, the average salary, and this is 2022 data, is right around $80,000 a year. But if you look at the rest of Western Pennsylvania, it's down around $60,000 a year. So one way of looking at that is that salaries in the Pittsburgh metro area are 30% higher than that of the rest of the western part of the state. So pretty big difference. We also know when we're looking at hourly wages that 1.9 million workers in Pennsylvania are making less than $15 an hour. And that statistic nationally is 19 million workers who are making less than that. So 1 out of every 10 workers in the US making less than $15 an hour is a worker here in Pennsylvania. And I thought that was pretty startling when I was getting ready for this talk. Then we can dig in a little further into like what is that population? Who is comprised like of that population that's making less than $15 an hour in Pennsylvania? 40% of all women in the labor force in Pennsylvania are making less than that amount. And 23% of men. And then if you dig further, we see that 54% of women in color in Pennsylvania are making less than that amount, and 38% of men of color, right? So we're really starting to see where some of these inequities and differences really start to show up. So when we at JFF over the past year really looked at what is the status of kind of the labor market in general across the country, particularly as it relates to quality jobs, we identified that there are 92 million US workers who are currently shut out of those quality jobs. And I'm going to walk us through a little bit of math to explain how we got to that number. So there are 164 million adults in the US labor force today, and 130 of them we define as facing systemic barriers to advancement. And when we think about that population, there are 4 broad categories. The first is most women, most people of color, any worker that does not have a 4-year college degree, and anyone with a criminal record. So 130 of the total 164 million adult labor force. 38 million of those workers are currently working in quality jobs. So 38 of the 130 million who face systemic barriers to advancement. And when we talk about quality jobs, I know it's an issue that lots of people have different definitions and frameworks for. I'm going to walk through how we think about it, and I know that Partner for Work has a set of quality jobs principles for Pittsburgh too, which is terrific and I think very aligned with how we think about it. But for us, first and foremost, it's compensation and benefits, right? So probably what everyone kind of first thinks of, and that's where the $15 an hour discussion is so important. But it's also about structure. So does the job provide stability? Does it provide a safe and healthy environment for the worker? Are there opportunities for promotion and advancement, and are those opportunities equitably distributed? And then finally, agency. So can a worker's voice be heard in the workplace? Do they have control of their own time? And things like that. So the importance of worker agency, which is something that I'm sure you all are experiencing, that we know that the next generation coming into the workforce, Gen Z, like that's like first and foremost in their mind, right? Something that we continue to need to be paying attention to. So 92 million are kind of what we see as the opportunity. 92 million workers across the country who are being shut out of these jobs. And so we have set a really bold goal, which is that in 10 years, we want to basically double the number. We want to see 75 million US workers who face systemic barriers to advancement working in quality jobs. And so we see that as our new North Star, and not just for JFF, but for the field at large, right? So we're hoping that communities like yours will join forces with us to really try to make this a reality. And I was excited about coming here today, given the really wonderful mix of public and private leadership that we have, because it's that type of partnership and collaboration and bridging that we're going to need in order to make this a reality. Because I think as you all experience from different, your positions and kind of the organizations that you're with, when we look at the workforce and education systems in this country, we really believe they're inequitable, they're disconnected, and they're very hard for workers and learners to navigate. And I think that that is true, unfortunately, in most communities, even though there's like wonderful pockets of innovation happening all over. But at the end of the day, these systems are really quite outdated. And so I think here in your region, you have really terrific initiatives underway that are really striving to solve this problem. I would argue that there's a need to collectively be even bolder, right? And really think about how can we be redesigning and transforming systems that truly meet the needs of workers and employers today and in the future. And I think that too often, and I say this kind of coming as someone who has a federal policy background, too often policymakers are really focused too much on incremental change, right? Because incremental change is often what is politically palatable. But to me, incremental change isn't what is needed to really see the impact that I think that we all believe is needed and the results that we all want to see. So how can we collectively be thinking bigger? It was the chancellor was talking about, it's a moment of so much political turmoil, but I truly think that these issues of jobs and quality jobs and focusing on workers is something that can truly have very strong bipartisan support. So again, in 10 years, we want to see 75 million workers facing systemic barriers to advancement working in quality jobs. And it's a big goal. We have 4 imperatives, as I said, of ways to think about taking action against this. So I'm going to walk through the 4 of these pretty quickly. The first is seizing the next frontier. And I know here we are kind of in the heart of institutions that are really looking into robotics and AI, and this is something really front and center, a big part of the Pittsburgh economy. And for us, artificial intelligence is really something that we need to be looking at, paying attention to, and leveraging as it relates to workers and as it relates to equity in the labor market. And so Sundar Pichai, who is the CEO of Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, he recently said that AI is something more profound than electricity or fire, which I thought was a pretty amazing statement. And I think AI is going to change everything, right? It's going to change the way people learn. It's going to change the way workers acquire skills. It's going to change the jobs that exist. And the impact of AI, to me, I really believe it's going to run deep. It's going to come fast, right? We're already seeing it come fast. I think the first time I ever heard of ChatGPT was at a meeting in October of 22, and to see how quickly that has become almost a household phrase has been pretty astonishing. And a few weeks ago, we even saw the White House issue a pretty sweeping executive order on AI that has very specific sections on workers and equity and civil rights as it relates to the impact and adoption of AI. I think as we think about the impact on workers and again on equity, there's a study that was recently done that looked at the top 15 jobs that are going to be exposed to AI. 71% of the workers in those 15 job categories are women. So again, disproportionately, the impact is going to be on women. 33% of those workers are people of color. So again, as we are working to put folks on pathways to quality jobs, how can we be factoring in these changes and impacts to jobs that are going to be coming pretty quickly as a part of that, so we don't end up with folks being left even further behind. I think that the good news is that many workers and learners are already have this on their radar, and we surveyed a couple thousand of them a few months ago. and saw that 58% of workers are saying that they know that they're going to have to upskill or reskill in the next 5 years because of AI. So that wasn't too surprising to me, but this next statistic really was, which is that 88% of the workers that we surveyed said that they don't trust their employer to help them figure this out. So a real deep distrust of employers came out very strong in this survey. So to me, that makes it more important, right, for regional collaborations like this to really be thinking about how are you going to kind of help workers transition in this time of really accelerated technological change. The good news is that your governor has been really a leader in this space. As I'm sure you all know, the Office of Administration has said that they're going to create materials and certifications so that state employees can be on the forefront of learning and understanding AI. He's developed a governing board that's going to oversee AI in the Commonwealth, and there's also a fellowship program that's been developed to enable graduate students to work with state agencies on issues of AI. And I read just like last week that these and other things that the governor and his team are doing has actually gotten him on the Forbes Future of Work list for this year, which I thought was pretty interesting. I think he was the only governor to make that list. And at JFF, we're looking at this from a few ways. We've recently launched a Center for AI and the Future of Work. It's been up and running for a few months. And we're really looking at this intersection of AI and work. And by and large, we really are pretty optimistic, because if we think about how we can leverage AI to help drive more personalized learning, how we can use it to accelerate upskilling and reskilling, and how we can really help, kind of emphasize the human components of jobs that are so critical. And we're also looking at AI as a creator of new quality jobs. And so I think looking at the opportunity, I think particularly in this region, that are the opportunities that are being created to expand the AI workforce and the jobs that are being initiated as part of that is really exciting. So a lot of the headlines that we're all seeing, right, big, huge starting salaries for PhD level machine learning experts and so on. That's true, but I would also argue that they're the outlier, right? If you really kind of look deeply into the types of jobs that are being created, the vast majority of them actually are good jobs that are accessible to really broad portions of workers. So 33% of workers in the AI field right now actually don't have 4-year degrees. And that, the statistics hold true that that's going to continue to be a trend. So when we're looking for good pathways to good jobs for workers who face barriers, this is, definitely a field to be keeping an eye on. Another one is virtual reality. And again, I know an issue that the universities here in Pittsburgh are definitely on the cutting edge of, but I want to talk a few minutes about kind of its context kind of in this quality jobs frame. So a few months ago in DC, I was able to facilitate a roundtable that Meta hosted with a number of companies and entrepreneurs who are developing virtual reality or immersive learning technologies that are really focused on the education and workforce space. And so it's interesting to think about, I know some of you may have kids who have the VR headsets, right? So my daughter's always like doing something on that, which is really interesting. But it's interesting to think about how you can utilize that technology more directly in worker training and education. So one of the companies is called Embodied Labs. And this is a technology that's used to train workers who work with individuals who have Alzheimer's or dementia. And by using this VR training, the healthcare worker is able to experience the cognitive, auditory, or vision loss that their patient is experiencing. So it really helps you kind of literally kind of like be in their shoes and see the impact that this that the diseases are having on them. And I know that in Pennsylvania, healthcare is one of the top growing industry sectors. So you can think about how can programs like Embodied Labs really be ways to be training more healthcare workers in a time that they're needed, so at a reduced cost in many cases. We're also seeing examples in higher ed. So we partner a lot with Morehouse College. They have actually taken a lot of their courses and subjects like journalism, English, biology, and others, and put them in a virtual reality space. What's interesting is they have seen attendance go up 10% for folks taking the virtual reality classes versus a traditional class, and they've seen their student success metrics go up 12%. So again, like really interesting to think about how this technology can actually help increase access and success in post-secondary settings. And similarly to what we talked about with AI, we have a report on our website that talks about how virtual reality and immersive learning companies are creating a lot of new high-quality jobs that don't require too many different skills than many workers in the labor market today actually have. So again, for AI and VR, not only looking at how the technologies themselves can build skill levels of workers and learners, but how these technologies are actually also the creators of new quality jobs. So I'm sure you all know that technology isn't the only new frontier, and Pittsburgh is really front and center on a lot of these new federal investments that are coming down the pike. So really an unprecedented amount of federal funding that's flowing as part of these three main federal statutes: the Infrastructure Investment Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act. All of them are going to have the impact of significant job creation, but also kind of leaving us with more of a gap around skilled workers and how we bridge kind of the supply and demand dynamics that are being created by these dollars. So a lot of the jobs across infrastructure, clean energy, advanced manufacturing, and more, many of them are going to pay good wages, competitive wages. A lot of those jobs are not going to require four-year degrees, and there's going to be a lot of them, right? So those are the good things. The challenges are a lot of workers don't know that these jobs exist, right? They don't have an easy, transparent way to kind of know about the jobs that are going to be created. And they don't always have flexible ways and accessible ways to get trained for those jobs, right? So again, a big opportunity here to make some connections. And again, you're on the forefront, right? So I know Pittsburgh's one of 5 workforce hubs that were selected by the White House. And I was reading that Dr. Biden was here pretty recently talking about that, which is terrific. I also know that the governor has a workforce transformation program that's going to put up to $400 million into training for workers for jobs that are being created by these federal funds. I know that Stephanie and her group and many of you are involved in the Build Back Better Regional Challenge grant that Pittsburgh received, which is terrific. So lots of encouraging steps. And I think the question is, how can you best kind of leverage this unique moment with new types of resources, new types of jobs being created as a moment to really intentionally start kind of decreasing some of those opportunity gaps that you're seeing across the region. So on that, one of the issues I think that has come up with some of this federal funding is there's a lot of debate starting to happen in DC about the fact that by and large the funding is being awarded competitively, right? Like the Build Back Better Regional Challenge investment. But the changes aren't being made to the underlying federal systems, whether that be the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act or the Higher Ed Act. Those formula programs are still, by and large, kind of carrying on the way they were. And so I think there's a policy opportunity at the federal level, but also, in states and within communities to really think about how can we be pushing the boundaries of these programs to really be making like longer lasting change, right? Otherwise, we're going to see situations where grant awards come in, but then the grants end, and we have to be, looking at sustainability of these efforts. So I'll give some examples of ideas that we have seen and that we're promoting both on the workforce side and the education side. So on the workforce side, back in 1997, 1998, I was part of the team at the U.S. Department of Labor that helped get the Workforce Investment Act enacted. And that was really the predecessor to WIOA that exists today, and by and large kind of like laid out the framework and the foundational pieces for today's public workforce system. But when I think back to then, Department of Labor, we didn't even have the technological ability to email, congressional staff, right? So we were literally walking pieces of paper from the Labor Department up to congressional office buildings, or we were faxing things over, right? But I say that because we were sitting and designing a system at a time where we couldn't have imagined, right, the technology that would exist 20 years down the road. And even though, right, there's obviously still serious issues around broadband access and so on, but I think it's concerning that we are still running kind of on these tracks that were built for traditional kind of bricks and mortar systems. So how can we start to kind of really think about new ways of delivering services, and how are we thinking about a workforce system not only for today, but for 10, 20, 30 years down the road. Another one is, and I mentioned the challenge of workers kind of not knowing that some of these new jobs exist. To me, one of the biggest issues that we have as a nation is that we don't have a robust, transparent, equitable career navigation system, right? It's very kind of dependent on where you live or what kind of entry point you come across, or what information does exist is very geared towards four-year opportunities, right? So how can we truly be creating a system that gives information to workers and learners about jobs that are in demand, the skills they need for those jobs, and the pathways to get them? On the education side, I know the Chancellor spoke about the great work that's been done over the years around early college high schools and dual enrollment. JFF's been involved in those issues for quite a long time, and they are great examples of that have strong evidence base and strong equity components for sure. But we still are seeing issues of lack of scale when it comes to those models. And we're still seeing statistics that are pretty troubling. And again, I'll give you a few national statistics just to kind of set the stage here a little bit. So first is what you think of as what they call the summer melt. So 40% of low-income students across the country get into college but don't actually show up in the fall, right? So you have a huge drop-off there that we talk about as the summer melt. We also see 34% of Black students nationwide who finish the first year of college but don't go back for the second year. We also know that 70% of Black students default on student loans, right? So we are seeing that, kind of despite all the great work that's been done around the country around college attainment and success, we're still seeing these leakage points. I'll also give this a quick example from Chicago. I was talking with a leader from Chicago about 2 weeks ago. This new report came out, and the good news headline of the report was that for Chicago public schools, their graduation rate has increased to 84%, which was really great news for them. But then there were sub-headlines that were, I felt, pretty discouraging. So they looked at the number of Chicago high school graduates who attained either a 2 or a 4-year degree within 10 years, and that percent was 30%. So 30% of students who graduated from high school in Chicago got a 2 or 4-year degree within a decade after graduation, so pretty low. And the percent for Black men in Chicago was just 13.6%. So we see that, this is an issue, and we're seeing persistent kind of drop-off points at every part of the transition. So whether that's between high school and post-secondary, whether it's between post-secondary and the labor market, or increasingly we're hearing from Gen Z learners that they want to go right into the labor market, right, and find opportunities where they can earn and learn at the same time. So how can we start to rethink these models in ways that don't have so much kind of drop-off between these points? So we asked a couple of questions. So one, how do you design a system that plugs those leakage points? And also, is there a way to design a new type of institution that specifically addresses the needs for 16 to 20-year-olds? For those folks, my daughter was a high school senior a few years ago, and you often see senior year is kind of focus on getting into college and then graduate, and it's can be kind of a lost year otherwise, right? So what if you restructured that and really put the students at the center of that experience? And so we have come up with a model we call the Big Blur, which really aims to blur the lines between high school and college, and to really build on what we in the field have learned from dual enrollment and early college high schools over the past couple of decades. And what this would do is it would fundamentally restructure grades 11 through 14. It would embed work-based learning as a key component throughout that experience. And this would really go further than kind of the current models that take a traditional high school and a community college and get them to work together. This would be really the creation of a new type of institution that would have new types of staffing models and so on. So it's a pretty bold idea. We've been working with a group of states in kind of an action lab to try to get this from idea to reality. And we're really excited to be working with Governor Polis and his team in Colorado, who have gone as far to actually establish a Big Blur task force and are actively working to kind of put elements of this model in place. So they're saying that every high school student is going to graduate with a credential that holds value in the labor market. So not just simply kind of looking at who's enrolling in college, but truly having that credential be part of the exit point from high school. So we'd be happy to dig in more on this as well. Couple other things. So system change. So those are all ideas that I would call, big and longer term ideas, right? How you actually set up a Big Blur model in your region. How you really think about transforming the public workforce system to be more future facing, right? Those aren't things that are going to happen tomorrow, but take, a lot of strategic planning to kind of get going. Want to focus on two more real-time examples of changes that are underway. The first is around the Google Career Certificates, which you may have heard of. So these are certificates that Google created, and they're intended to help individuals who they don't need a 2 or a 4-year degree, but having one of these certificates can really help them get a good job in the IT sector. In Pennsylvania, the state higher ed department has started to embed these across the colleges in Pennsylvania, which is terrific. We've seen New York and Texas do that as well. And probably the state that has done this in a most comprehensive way is Connecticut, where they have incorporated these certificates both in their 2 and their 4-year colleges. These are certificates that are also available through kind of non-traditional providers as well. But we really think that kind of connecting them to the higher ed institutions is a great way to get to scale. So a little more about them. So they are offered in 6 different IT fields, everything from user experience design to cybersecurity. There are about 2.4 million open quality jobs across those 6 fields across the country right now. The average salary of those jobs is $72,000 a year. So again, these are kind of like, you know, almost like, think of like almost like entry tickets, right, into a quality job, right, by going down this path. There have been 200,000 individuals who have already attained these certificates. 82% of them have reported a positive outcome, and a positive outcome could be a new job, a promotion, or a raise. And 55% of those who have completed identify as workers of color. So JFF has been a partner with Google on this and really helping institutions think through how to either offer these as standalone certificates or also how to embed them in existing IT pathways. So it's just an interesting model that Pennsylvania has already latched onto, which is great to see. The next is the Job Quality Academy, which you may have heard of. This is being run by the U.S. Department of Labor, and JFF is the contractor that is kind of managing this on the department's behalf. There were 16 teams selected from across the country to be part of the initial cohort, 2 from Pennsylvania, one that's being led by the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Board, and the other that's being led by Partner for Work here in Pittsburgh. The other partners here, along with Partner for Work, are SEIU, the Center for Healthcare Solutions, Pennsylvania Career Link, and Pittsburgh Public Schools. And so the Pittsburgh team decided to focus on, you know, the specific job quality issue that he decided to focus on was really how to improve conditions for frontline healthcare workers, really with the goal of increasing retention for workers in those jobs and helping employers decrease their attrition rates. So that was kind of the problem that this team really decided to focus in on. And Bonnie Yeager, I'm sure you all know, had this great quote that I thought I would share, which is that you rarely get a chance to think strategically across organizations, and this academy gave us the mechanism for thinking about what we really need to do to improve jobs. So like what you're doing here, taking the time to really step back and think about what practical action steps can you take, I think is really exciting. All right. The third imperative is for us investing in human potential, right? It was a phrase that we hear more and more, and I think particularly with the advances of AI, right? Folks really focusing on, you know, putting the worker and learner at the center of solutions. One thing I want to really focus on is a lot of you may have heard a lot of discussion lately across many different kind of parts of the field around skills-based hiring or kind of skills-first model. So really working with employers, education providers to really stop using kind of the 4-year degree as that kind of hiring signal, and instead really putting the skills that folks have, that they're earning kind of through their job and other experiences, really at the forefront. And so again, your state has been kind of on the forefront here. So Pennsylvania is one of about 17 states that have taken action to remove 4-year degree requirements from your state jobs. So as I understand it, Governor Shapiro, this was actually the first executive order that he signed, was to make this change. And so for Pennsylvania, that was 92% of state jobs had the degree requirements removed from them. So that's pretty significant. And again, Pennsylvania is one of about 17 or 18 states. It seems to increase every day, so I'm not sure of the exact count today. The other thing that is interesting about this mix of states is that this is an effort that is very bipartisan, right? In a day where we don't see a whole lot of like bipartisan agreement, but you have both Republican and Democratic governors who are taking this step. Similar efforts are happening at the federal level too around federal hiring and federal contracting requirements. I've had the pleasure to talk with Larry Hogan a couple times recently, the former governor of Maryland. He was actually the first, when he was in office, he was the first governor to make this change. And he was telling me that they have seen a 41% increase of hires of workers, state workers without college degrees, just in the first year since this new policy was in place. And I think that means it's roughly about 43,000 workers, I believe. So this is just an example of a change that is happening at scale. And I think, as an example of how policy, federal and state policy can really be a true effective lever around access to quality jobs. And the last piece I want to focus on before we enter into questions is around activating equity. Because we know that despite like so many good efforts that are happening around the country, and some of the data that I've talked about like shows, there's still really significant achievement gaps, employment gaps, wealth gaps across our communities. And I think the one thing I've learned in my many years in this space is that you need intentional action to reverse those trends, right? Just kind of thinking like, oh, whatever, a rising tide raises all boats, right? Doesn't really happen, right? So you need to really figure out intentional policy interventions, intentional program design to help close these gaps. So I'm going to focus on two quick things. The first is that we are doing a deep dive into increasing the number of Black workers who work in the tech field, and I'll give an example why. So Black workers in the US workforce, about 12% of total workforce, but in the tech workforce, just 8%. And Black women in tech is just 3%. So again, pretty significant gaps. Meanwhile, tech jobs are expected to grow 14% in the US in the next decade, but the expected growth of Black tech talent is expected to be just 8%, right? So we see this as a very specific gap that we want as JFF to help close. And give an example of where we have seen a pain point is on that issue of pipeline. And so we recently did a study with the National Student Clearinghouse, and it showed that out of the 1,000 post-secondary institutions that offer IT programs, either degrees or credentials, this was pretty staggering to me. Only 350 of those programs enrolled at least 10 Black men, and only 150 of them enrolled at least 10 Black women. So how can we be actively building the pipeline of talent into these programs, right? And so I think this is an example of when you really dig into the data, really start to see where these gaps exist. The last one I'll talk about quickly, like this is National Apprenticeship Week, if you didn't know. And we recently dug into some issues of gender equity in apprenticeship. So I think the good news is that the number of apprenticeships continues to grow around the country and is continuing to grow and expand into new and different industries, which is awesome. But in youth apprenticeship, we're seeing some kind of discouraging trends. So for example, the leading youth apprenticeship pathway for women is pharmacy tech. It's a job that pays $12 an hour. For men, the top occupation is electrician, which pays $26 an hour, right? So here we are, like, these are the kind of the pre-apprenticeship programs, and we're seeing, kind of gender occupational segregation kind of happening, and this is national data, right? So as we're expanding like the total number of apprenticeships, how can we also be intentionally diversifying the pipeline into apprenticeship? So those examples like may or may not like resonate for all of you in this region, but examples of the types of data that I would encourage you to really be digging into to see what solutions do you need to build to overcome them. So again, these are the 4 areas that we feel very passionate about. And I hope that you will join us in achieving this North Star over the next decade, and look forward to having some questions with Stephanie to see where we can dig in some more. But thank you again for having me. My colleague David Allstat is here. He's going to be here the rest of the day, and happy to provide any additional information on our work or how we can help support the great work that you're doing here in the region.
Maria, that was the breadth of information you shared with us was extraordinary, and I could ask you a lot of questions, but I understand in the interest of time, we only get time for a few. So we will jump in. So one of the things there are a couple things that I want to talk about that didn't really come up. One is just this question of the intergenerational workforce we're dealing with and the challenges that we're all facing of accommodating Gen Z, the aging population. Pittsburgh in particular has quite unique challenges in that space. I think we're the oldest counties in the country, and you're really seeing kind of multi-generation in the workforce, and also how that fits with a hybrid workforce. So can you just talk a little about shifting cultures and some of the solutions and opportunities you've seen?
Yeah, I think it's a huge issue, and even my organization, right, we're seeing it. So one I would say is that I've learned that Gen Z can't be ignored, right? So it's I think these issues that have really come up, I would say almost kind of in the wake of COVID, right, around worker voice and young people really wanting their employer to kind of be aligned with their values. To me, that's not something that's going to go away. So it's how can organizations of all sizes really start to embrace that? And then how can we also be bringing all generations along in that process? So, and I think for me, as someone who started working in early 90s, it's some of that stuff would have been never imaginable, right? The question or the expectations that you were going to put on employers. But I think that's here to stay. So I think it's how, are there ways to leverage different generations in the workforce to help mentor younger generations? How can you use technology in a way that can be a unifier, right? We often hear that folks who might be more introverted or less likely to speak up actually being in Zoom, where they feel that it's kind of an equal playing field. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
So one of the things that strikes me that I'm curious how we accommodate is you're showing us VR training and talking a lot about generative AI, and we're thinking about kind of an entirely new way of using technology. We in Pittsburgh, everywhere, are accommodating emerging, really, out there technologies in the space. Yet at the same time, we need a workforce that has the soft skills, the leadership, the teamwork, the ability to actually work in a workforce, but many of them are sitting at home. How do you blend the ability to accommodate technology in redesigning the way we educate and train people blend that with the concept of how we create people that are workforce ready, ready to be in environments, and actually the ability to actually be ready to kind of be promoted and move into space?
Definitely. So I think it's both, right? It's the both and scenario. That's why we put such an emphasis on work-based learning, internships for all ages, right? Not just for young people in high school, but also for adults who are looking to switch careers, how to really help them get true project-based, work-based experiences that can help build out those soft skills or power skills, or whatever we want to call them, because it's going to, I think, as technology continues to increase, it's those kind of employability skills that are going to be so critical.
So Pittsburgh is a 10-county region, and we've got a pretty solid, urban core, and then we've got a whole bunch of communities around suburban, rural, requiring much different solutions, different flavors of talent needs and industries attracting there. Can you talk a little bit about some examples you may have in your toolkit around rural, suburban, urban dynamics, and where we can kind of look to some solutions to make sure we're accommodating different communities the right way?
Yeah, so one, I think, comes back to intentionality. And I remember back when I was at the Labor Department, I was doing some work in Mississippi. And it was a time when a lot of the food processing plants were closing in Mississippi, but a lot of the auto manufacturers were opening up plants there. And I remember there were folks who were saying, well, this is like gonna be easy. We take the folks who are losing their job over here and we're gonna reemploy them over here. But really kind of discounting the skill transitions and enhancements that needed to take place. And so I think really thinking through, and the good news is there's great data now through folks like Lightcast or Burning Glass Institute that can make this easier now to really do an analysis of, where are there targeted skill enhancements that would be helpful to really prepare folks, potentially in more rural communities for these jobs that are opening up. I think also like thinking through how can the public workforce system really help folks navigate virtual job opportunities, right? I think that's something that the workforce system really hasn't done a ton of in the past, but that's a big opportunity as well. And we have some resources on our website that are looking at, how best to do strategies like dual enrollment in rural areas. We have initiatives that are looking at immigrant populations in rural areas and what strategies can be developed to help them as well.
So, I'm going to ask one or two more questions and then see if there may be one or two from the audience before we wrap. So, we spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh second guessing ourselves and thinking maybe there are other places that are better or otherwise, and you commented on some really amazing things happening here, whether it's the Workforce Hub or some of the leadership that many of our institutions are playing, funding that has come in. I would say based on what you see here and the opportunities that are coming from DC from a funding perspective, where are the next opportunities? What should we be looking at? And are there any regions that you would call out to say, check them out, they're really onto something terrific that you could learn from?
Yeah, I think, yep. So one, I definitely think you truly do have a lot to build from. I would say on that one, like start thinking now of how you're going to sustain and scale the innovations that you're able to create through the Build Back Better Regional Challenge funding or the other funding that's coming in, right? So looking to see how can you make those changes lasting. I think also, and I live outside of Boston, so we have a similar dynamic, right? You have the big kind of high-powered universities, and then you kind of have like everybody else, right? So how can you be building like intentional connections between kind of those anchor universities and other parts of the community? And we heard some of that from the chancellor, but I encourage more of that. For example, we're seeing MIT is starting to build intentional partnerships with some of the kind of regional state four-year universities in Massachusetts around things like photonics, which I think is great, right? Because it's really pairing kind of what used to be kind of the innovator kind of in a bubble in with the institutions that are really helping educate the folks in the community. So I would look at things like that too.
So you commented on the fact that we have new leadership at the state that's really open for change, innovative. We also recently elected a new county executive who's similarly inspired for change. So we're open for bold policies. You talked about how we need to rethink the whole WIOA workforce board concept potentially at the federal level. Any state policy solutions, bold actions you would look to us to challenge us to achieve in this region or at the state level?
So one is, I think, a big hurdle, I'm sure you all feel, is like just around the availability and the connectivity of data, right? So Texas is doing some interesting work around their higher ed data and really connecting it to labor market outcomes. So I think that's an area that we could potentially push more on. You had asked before too about like other regions, like Cincinnati is always doing interesting things around sector strategies that have been going on for quite a while, I was gonna say, and Louisville too. So I would say like, yeah.
Wonderful. Any questions? Any couple? You can probably pick one or two from the crowd. Yes. I can't see exactly who that is yet, but could you introduce yourself before you ask the question?
Hi. Good afternoon. I'm Georgia Petropoulos, and I applaud you both. I know I'm new to a lot of the statistics that both of you spoke to, and so I'm going to walk away here today with many pictures on my phone from the data, so it was pretty amazing. So you both referenced systems change, new leadership, opportunities, big federal funds coming down the pike. I've always been intrigued about the concept of prevailing wage, which was from an act, right,
Yep.
1930s, to assist construction,
Yep.
which historically, at least in my family, I have many in the trades in my family, was predominantly white, predominantly male. So is there a way that that concept can now translate to the new jobs of the new century? And I'm going to your gender parity and race parity, the slide that you showed on technicians versus other jobs.
It's a great question. And when I was reading the quality job principles that Partner for Work, are you all from Yes. I noticed that there was an element in those principles about community labor agreements and things like that, which I think get to your point of how can we be leveraging, new construction in the area and all to really be a path to quality jobs. So I think to me, the near-term potential is in what agreements you can be building within the community, because I don't see anything happening at the federal level right now. But I think you really have a strong opportunity here within the community to be, putting those things in place as the funding becomes available. Does that sound right? Is that, oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I was reading that. It's very good. I read it last night.
Any other questions from the crowd? Dr. Bullock.
Quentin Bullock, Community College of Allegheny County. I really enjoyed the data that you were sharing and talking about the redesign and reimagining the workforce. In your work, can you share any best practices that you have seen from the community college side? We emphasize a lot of work readiness, preparing persons for work. Love to hear any thoughts you have from a community college side.
Absolutely. So to me, I think community colleges are where so much of this innovation can take place. I would say one, always finding new ways to partner with local employers, right? And particularly around shorter term programs, right, that may not need to go through all of the regular kind of program approvals, right? But are there kind of agile ways that you can be kind of keeping pace with the jobs that are in demand? I would say like states that we tend to track, or again, Texas doing a lot of interesting work, North Carolina, always a leader, Colorado's doing a lot right now as well. But also like thinking about how community colleges can help students like really kind of focus on those pathways to quality jobs. So thinking about kind of the role that community colleges play in that. Are there ways to kind of think about putting skills kind of at the forefront of the work? I was talking with Union College in New Jersey lately, and they're using something called a skillabus, so not a syllabus, but a skillabus, so to actually like helping students really concretely see what skills they are learning in each of their courses, which I thought was interesting. So I think there's just a lot of opportunity to like be a key engine in this overall effort.
I think we've come out of time, so what I want to say to you, and then I have one last question for you, is, we love to test and try ideas here. I think this is a community that's very good at collaboration and really open to partnership. And so as you're thinking about the big blur, or some of the, and your bold goal of, advancement of 75 million people facing barriers, if there's a way that this community can help incubate an idea or test some of your solutions, I know you have a real fun.
Yeah, no, we would love to do that. And the person who runs our workforce transformation work is Josh Kopis, who worked for Josh, who is from here. And so he was so happy I was coming here. He said, tell them we want to do more together. So we would love that.
Why don't you just give us a final call to action? What do you want to say to us?
Oh, boy. I would say,
kind of walk away from this and say, here's what really we need to go do and make that.
Yeah, I would say it's an area where dot connecting is key, right? When I was reading through the commitments that were part of the White House briefing, right? Lots of great commitments that are coming out of the public and private sector here. But how can you kind of tie all that work together into a true, like, cohesive equitable strategies. That would be my call to action. Bring the pieces together.
And I think that sounds like a great way to end and tie back to the theme of today. So Maria, thank you again. Thank you for bringing your insights and your ideas and incredible information to our community.
Thank you for having me.